Welcome back to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the downright eerie. Today we have a bizarre story from a Reddit user who we'll call Eric. Now this story, partway through, just seems unbelievable. And then it takes several twists and turns to make it even more so. But stick around to the end, because there's quite a twist. Eric had been living in a small, older, two-bedroom home for about 3 years, and it was built in the 60s, so it had all the usual quirks you might expect, like creaky floors, outdated outlets, and windows that sort of shook and rattled when it stormed. Eric worked remotely, and he generally kept to himself. He really didn't get out very much, and the house was small enough, and he spent enough time in it that pretty much every inch of it had become familiar. I mean, it was to the point where it was almost muscle memory that he could walk through it blindfolded. But then on a Tuesday morning, Eric woke up to his familiar sheets on his familiar bed in the same room he had slept in for 3 years. He sat up, kind of positioned himself on the edge of the bed as he stretched and tried to convince himself to finish getting up and getting his day started. Then he walked down the short hall to the kitchen where he started to brew his coffee. He grabs a mug, and as soon as it's done brewing, he fills his cup and starts back down the hallway to begin his workday. But as he gets about halfway down the hall, something grazes his hip. He looks down at what he sees, and he's instantly shocked and confused. He just freezes and stares. He just doesn't know how to make sense of what he's seeing here. It's right in front of his eyes, but it's impossible. It's a doorknob. It's attached to a door directly between the bathroom and guest room. But the part of this that's really making Eric uneasy isn't that there's a doorknob on a door. It's that the 3 years he's lived in this house, there's never been a door here. This is completely new, and he didn't put it there. But somehow this narrow door had the exact same off-white paint and handles as the bedroom doors. But even if someone had somehow crept into his house at night and installed a door that matched the rest of his house perfectly, and they did all this without waking him, it still would be for nothing, because there was nothing on the other side of that wall except part of a guest room and part of a bathroom. But after a while of just staring dumbfounded at this door, he started to rationalize. He thought, okay, it's impossible for a door to just appear, so maybe the floor plan's different than I thought, and it just leads to a crawl space or something, or maybe a small closet. He thinks to himself, I don't know how I never noticed this, but that's got to be it. Doors don't just appear. And still it's eating at him because, well, as far as he remembered, it was just this bare, solid, dry wall. So finally, after standing there staring at it, he's got this internal dialogue going on. He decides he's just fed up, he's going to open it. So he reached down and grabbed the doorknob, but immediately he jerked his hand back. Because this doorknob was cold. Not just cool, but like it had been sitting in a freezer. And at this point, Eric couldn't help but laugh. He decided he'd made way too much out of this door, and now his mind is playing tricks on him. He thought, here he is, a grown man, staring at a door, wondering how it got there. So he decided to just try and shake it off, chalk it up to kind of this weird sleep haze, or maybe he was just missing something obvious. So he chose to just ignore it, finish his coffee, and move on with his day. So he did just that, and as he started work, he quickly forgot about it, and his day went on about as normal as any other. Up until a few hours later. Then he decided to grab some lunch. Because when he walked down the hallway hours later, the door was of course still there, but now it was slightly open. When he saw it, all the panic from earlier came flooding back, and Eric just stood frozen in the hallway. The door, the one that hadn't existed yesterday, was cracked open just enough to see darkness inside. And he shook off the initial panic and told himself, look, it's just a closet. And he started toward it for a better look. And against every instinct screaming in his head, he reached out and pushed the door fully open. And he leaned in, but again, he was just in total disbelief. Inside, he could see this very narrow, deep hallway, and it seemed obvious that it was built to be used regularly because the walls were the same as his house. They were aged white plaster with slight cracks, faint scuffs. Why would builders bother making it match the rest of the house if it was just going to be hidden away? But then how had he never noticed it? And his curiosity at this point far outweighed his fear, so he grabbed a flashlight and stepped inside. One foot, then the other. And the temperature dropped instantly. Not freezing, but uncomfortably cold. This part must have been insulated from the rest of the house, he thought. As he got just a few steps in, the door behind him closed. He turned around fast, and the door was sealed tight. But like you couldn't even see the door. There was no handle or locks. It was like it was made to be a secret exit. So he pushed hard, but he couldn't find how to open it back up. He swallowed hard, turned back toward the hallway, and he's starting to wonder about this house and his mental stability. Because this hallway stretched impossibly far, like much farther than the length of his house, to the point where he couldn't even see the end of it. So he starts walking toward the end of this thing, and as he walks, the sound of his steps, they change from echoing on wood to sounding like he's walking on something cushioned, like maybe carpet, but there's no carpet beneath his feet. And the walls begin to shift too. So the paint gave way to something looking more organic, like some sort of algae or moss, but it was smooth and almost wet looking in some places. Then as he kept going, he started to see pictures hung up on the wall. There were dozens of them, and they just kept going and going, but not a single one was something that he remembered taking, framing, or just hanging anywhere in his house, much less there. He had never seen this place before. One showed him as a boy, sitting on a beach, but the man next to him wasn't his father. Another showed him at his old job in a uniform he never wore, and then in one he was older, holding a baby he didn't have, and he had on his hand a wedding ring that he didn't own. He wasn't married. And every photo was of him living a life he did not remember. At this point, Eric is beyond freaked out. His chest is tightening. His heart's beating like a drum. He feels like he's in some kind of Twilight Zone. This wasn't some forgotten guest room or secret renovation. This was something totally different. I mean, was he being stalked in this underground tunnel by some psychopath that's been photoshopping him into these pictures? What's happening here? He can't believe it. But then ahead, he saw it. Another door, identical to the first, slightly open. Hoping against hope that this was somehow a way out of this nightmare, he took a deep breath and just stepped through, and the second the door clicked shut behind him, there he was, back in his house, the same hallway, with the same faint smell of coffee still lingering in the air. Now, for a moment, he felt a wave of relief, but at the same time, something felt off. As he looks around, he notices a framed painting that he didn't own. It's just an old painting of a bowl of lemons. So nothing super out of the ordinary, but just not his taste. Not something that he remembers buying and not something that he would buy. So he continues on slowly, making his way to the living room. And as he walks through, he notices the couch is the wrong color. It's a faded green instead of gray. The coffee table had a glass top. It didn't before. And the TV is bigger than he remembered, and it was playing static, even though he hadn't turned it on. But then the most unsettling thing. He heard footsteps coming from the kitchen. It sounded like bare feet on tile. So Eric rounded the corner, ready to see who was in his house, and he's got his flashlight pulled up, ready to use it as a weapon if he needs to. And as soon as his eyes landed on who was making that sound, he stopped cold. There, standing at the sink, back turned, was himself. Same hair, same clothes, same exact scar on the right hand. He was washing a plate like it was just any other ordinary morning. Now, Eric, almost unable to breathe at this moment, he didn't make a sound, but the other version of him stopped washing and got tense. And then it turned, Same face, same eyes, but somehow vastly different. There was something hollow behind that stare, like it knew that he was there, like it had been expecting him. And then, without breaking eye contact, the other Eric raised his hand and pointed toward the hallway. Eric turned to look. Another door had appeared, right where the first one had been that morning. Only this one was red and pulsing slightly. A low vibration filled the room, and it was getting louder and louder by the second. So Eric bolted for it. He didn't think, he just ran through it open, hurled himself through, and landed in bed. Gasping, sweating, it was morning. His real morning. The sunlight was streaming through the blinds, and everything looked exactly right. The green couch was gone. The lemons were gone, but no extra doors, no second hallway, just his normal, familiar, quiet house. So at first he laughed, still shakily. Had it all been a dream, he wondered, a sleepwalking episode? Some elaborate trick of the mind, because this felt and seemed so real. But then he turned, and he saw something on the nightstand. A framed photo of him, but it looked older, and he's holding a baby with a wedding ring on his hand. So what do you do when your mind shows you something impossible? When you wake up in the same bed, but the world feels slightly tilted, like someone's rearranged your life just enough that you question your own memory. Eric never found that door again. He checked every inch of the hallway, studied the wall with a flashlight, ran his hands across it dozens of times, and there were no seams, no drafts, and unfortunately no answers. But the photo stayed. He never remembered taking it, he never met the baby, and he never wore that wedding ring. But some nights, just before falling asleep, he swears he can hear footsteps in the hallway that shouldn't be there. Thanks for listening to Legends May Live, where we explore the strange, the mysterious, and the deeply unsettling. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who enjoys the weird corners of reality. And remember, sometimes the scariest places are the ones you thought you knew the best. Until next time, stay curious and stay out of strange doorways.